Hey everybody, good evening and welcome to the Caswell Cooke Show. My name's Caswell Cooke and here we are on another episode, another night. It's chilly here in Rhode Island tonight. It was like warm for several days and now all of a sudden it feels like winter again, which is why I'm in front of the fireplace that's not on. But well, you're gonna get to meet them and talk to them with us, and of course. Wherever you're watching, some people are tuning in on YouTube. Some people are watching us on one of the 10 Facebook channels that we're on. But wherever you are, if you make your way back to the Caswell Cooke Show Facebook page or YouTube page, please subscribe to us, follow us, like us, just so you can see all these great shows that we do. And you can watch some of the cool interviews we've had with a lot of great actors, musicians, politicians, everyone that we try to talk to over the years. So without further ado, let me bring on my guests tonight who are in two different parts of the world. Owen and Mihal, let's bring them back on. Let's bring them on.
Hey, Caswell, everyone. Great to be here. That's a fabulous intro you have there, Caswell. I hadn't seen that before. It's really funny.
Well, my producer, Ben Barber, said, just go down to the beach and do something stupid. I figure, I come from the school of Conan O'Brien and stuff. So he always did stupid stuff like that out in the street before he got too rich,
Well, I've been listening. Hello, everybody from Ireland. It's coming up to 1 a.m. My ideal hour of the morning, actually. But here in Ireland, I've been listening to good old Conan, a great son of Ireland as well. I've been listening to Conan's podcast as well, and I don't envy his brain. He's mad, daft as a brush.
He's a genius. Yeah.
Well, it's very cool. And I didn't even put two and two together. Of course, he's Irish. Conan O'Brien.
Proud Irishman.
Mom has a house here in our town, Westerly, Rhode Island. So when I first started my show years ago, I knew he was in town visiting his mom. So I knocked on his door and said, "Hey, will you do an interview?" And he goes, "Oh, my mother watches your show." Because back then we were on local cable before
Mrs.
we had
O'Brien. How are you, Mrs. O'Brien?
I don't know if she still watches.
She's definitely watching, Caswell.
From somewhere.
I think she is.
So yeah, so we have that connection here. So you guys are, musicians, poets, and maybe comedians of some sort.
Well, our life, our creative lives are between many things, Caswell. Between many things, we're kind of half academics, half entertainers, half traditional musicians, half pop singer songwriters. I was a rapper at one stage.
Four halves, right there.
Four halves. I'm still a vocal percussionist and beatboxer. In the very much aspirationally in the vein of Bobby McFerrin and the hip hop beatboxers. And Owen is a grunger.
That's a joke. No?
What did you say?
We don't joke around. We don't.
Well, what I think is hilarious is, so I'm listening to your music and the songs you perform, and so you go from this one thing where I'm watching you and you're beatboxing, and then I clicked another button and you're singing Ubi Caritas.
Yeah, Ubi Caritas is a really beautiful Gregorian chant, Latin chant. And we always love shoving things together, actually. Yeah.
Well, what we like to bring, Caswell, to anyone, in shows. In the last year, all of our stuff has been online, in this format. And what we love to show is that really we're bringing everything that we've inherited from our parents and from Irish culture and Irish heritage. And we've learned that there's no point in kind of separating things out. We like to just stick it all together. This is everything we've learned. This is everything we've experienced. This is what interests us. And we find if we just do what interests us, we end up with a community of self-selected souls like yourself. And we usually end up having a great old time, And
well, it's funny because, I've never seen someone do that kind of a diverse mix of music. I mean, I only knew Ubi Caritas because I spent years in my Episcopal church choir. So, we kind of sang that stuff. Of course, we sang it a little bit differently, but yours was beautiful. But you're right. So it's like, I guess if you just put everything in the pot, you're going to come up with a pretty good stew.
That's sort of the way we've ended up. Yeah, it's kind of we've put one foot in front of another. And again, I mentioned our parents. They were from a very musical house of musicians. Our father was a composer, a piano player. Our mother is a singer, and both of them great academics as well too. So at home growing up, we were playing and performing and experiencing all this music and dance and culture, but also afterwards we would talk about it and analyze it and talk about its meaning and even what it represented symbolically and metaphorically and even spiritually as well too. So a house of great, because all art has actually a history behind it. There she is, yeah. So she's an extraordinary store of traditional Irish song, the most ancient traditional Irish song, which is in the Irish language. And she's an expert in that type of singing, and she's also an expert in Gregorian Latin chant. So when we were in our 20s, we started to sing with her in some performances, and it slowly we started to inherit her tradition. And before that, Micheál was quipping that I was a grunger, and we had, before we started performing with her, we had a different incarnation, as we had a pop band. We were going to make it. We were going to make it in the pop industry.
And we almost did, Caswell, but who did?
Almost,
I don't suppose. Really,
I know. We almost did. Yeah. We also knocked on Conan O'Brien's door a few times, and but while we were doing that, we were performing with our mom, and we were inheriting all this stuff, from Irish culture and through our parents, and slowly people were inviting us to do that as well too. And what was fascinating was, at one stage, people were actually paying us to do this one thing, and we were paying to do the other kind of music industry kind of thing. So we discovered sort of very naturally that we didn't have to separate those worlds. No. We could bring it all together. And that's the road we've been walking ever since. Yeah.
And our mom sings this a cappella, unaccompanied Gregorian chant and these ancient Irish lamentations, and she uses procession as well. So we started singing with her in a trio,
Is that the one that was called Amen? Amen.
Yeah, Amen.
Right. Yes.
A was for the audience, M was for Micheál, E was for Owen, the Irish, and N was for Noreen. So it was actually an acronym, actually. But so that was like really amazing. And we traveled a bit of Europe and America, performing at sacred song festivals. And so we were inheriting this by almost unbeknownst to ourselves while we were, flying to LA trying to get that record deal. Well, the last record deal ever, actually.
They don't really make them anymore.
No, they don't. But our mom uses procession as well. So, we did a show for PBS, near you guys there in the Kate, and we processed in from the back at the beginning, with some Gregorian chant, and went straight into one of our songs. So we kind of just came upon that original mix, but it took a bit of bravery to do it. But the feedback is immense, because underestimating an audience is another thing that we noticed going on in the music industry, that trying to specify and separate everything was something that was actually quite frustrating to the audience, but they didn't know it. So when you mix everything together, they don't know whether to laugh or cry sometimes, and that can be really where art can really hit you.
You mentioned comedy as well too, and we love. We're the only in our family, just the two of us, and so there's a lot of great brotherly banter that goes on. So we can't help ourselves as well to bringing in humor, which of course has a profound way of subverting the situation and turning things upside down and allowing you to see things from a different perspective that perhaps you hadn't seen before. And so we love to bring in humor and then mix that with speaking and storytelling and poetry as well too. So we bring in a lot of poetry, and Micheál just recently published his first poetry book. Yeah. So now it's poetry. Who knows what's next? It'll be contemporary, interpretive dance. I don't know. Maybe a guest appearance from you, Caswell. What's next?
Well, I don't know, but we don't want to let that book thing go by without you saying something about it, Micheál. What's it called? Where do we find it?
Sure thing. Yeah, maybe we can put a link in the chat there. But it is called Early Music. It's a little book of poetry that is published by myself and Manny Rivers, which is a publishing house in Seattle. So me and Owen were very honored and lucky to meet around a decade ago, this amazing mercurial kind of Indiana Jones British man living on the west coast of America called David Whyte. Now, David Whyte recites his own poetry and other people's poetry. He's a poet philosopher, and he can back up that description. Actually, he's quite extraordinary, virtuosic, and you feel when you're listening to David Whyte like you're back in the 1800s with that type of amazing virtuosity of speaking, and everyone kind of falls into reverie. And the power of poetry, reciting poetry, actually was taught to us by him. So I wrote a collection of poems, and Owen recites as well some famous Irish poems as well, and that's been the latest art form of ours. So that's called Early Music, and it's a little book of poetry. There it is on the beautiful Amazon.
Ooh, Amazon.
The Amazon
do you ever look and see like where you are on the Amazon bestseller chart?
I did once, and I sent him a screenshot, and he was like, "What are you talking about? What is that?" He didn't realize that there was that thing. That's how less of an ego. That's how, his ego is it doesn't exist actually. He didn't even know there was an Amazon chart.
I actually published a book, and it was I think it went as high as number 32,000 on the Amazon, and I was like, "Holy crap! I'm in the top 40,000."
Top 40,000. There's a lot of books out there, Caswell. That's not bad. Show us the book. What is it?
What genre?
It's called "The Death and Resurrection of the Episcopal Church: How to Save a Church in Decline." There's my plug. I just got mad at how stuff is. In America, these churches are all fading, and I figured I'd write a book about it.
Well, that's really interesting, actually. Yeah, because of course we're, the Irish story is coming out of the Roman Catholic tradition. At one stage, Ireland was the most Roman Catholic country in the world. 99%, and most of the Catholic schools to this day are all owned by the Catholic Church. But of course, now the Catholic Church is also in great transition as well too, and it's really an interesting move, because you're not just talking about the Catholic Church. You're actually talking about Irish society and the Irish relationship to spirituality, and how we experience spirituality in community together. And so it's a very exciting time when you view it that way. It's like, well, how is our expression of spirituality in community changing? Because if you look at every human society, there's always a communal expression of the spiritual. So what does it mean really today for us to do that? And that's part of our work now too, especially with COVID and with the lockdown. We've brought all of our work online, and we're working really closely with our mom, with Noreen, on that. Very like this, Caswell, except you are our mom. And the three of us present on all sorts of stuff throughout it's very similar to this.
And people can find that, by the way, on your website. They can find your online courses, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that's been amazing, because what's happened is a community has formed. People keep coming back and attending all of these courses that we're doing, and some of them are based on the Christian festivals. We just did one around Easter, and then the Celtic saints are cool too. Like we have Saint Bridget, Saint Patrick, of course, and all of these saints were based on a more ancient Celtic Druidic culture. And these saints were also interpreted in different ways at different times throughout Irish history. So our journey now is to say, well, how do we reinterpret these stories today in community together? What does it mean in a post-Episcopal Rhode Island, in a post-Catholic Ireland? What does it mean to talk about St. Patrick today? Or is there any meaning? Should we just let go of it all entirely? So we found this amazing community happening that would never have happened as quickly or as sort of robustly as it has over the last year with the kind of lockdowns and restrictions. Yeah.
So tell me about, the word Celtic in America probably is misunderstood, and probably doesn't mean what you think it means. So what countries, define what Celtic is? Is it just Irish? Is it Scotland? Is it where is it?
It's a great question.
Jeez, Caswell, that's fighting talk there. That's serious stuff.
Well,
go on, you give it a blast there now.
There's history, and then there's artistically and creatively. I suppose the modern understanding of Celtic in the music industry or the artistic industries would be music from Ireland and Scotland, and usually on almost New Age as well. The New Age shelf title, which is, or the genre, which is changing into another name now, I think, actually. But so that understanding of Celtic is Irish traditional and kind of New Age meditation, almost mystical. But the Celts were a people as well, you know, and Owen speaks really well on that.
It's really complicated. It's highly contested because everything, again, like we're talking about history isn't the past at all. What we're talking about is history is present, how we're defining ourselves. And I'll give you a great example of that. There was an extraordinary exhibit of Celtic artifacts at the British National Museum in London that I went to a few years ago and walked through, and they'd gathered all of these really famous artifacts from the Celtic peoples, you know, of Western Europe. And there was a Celtic civilization in Western Europe. And you go through this beautiful exhibit, and they have these huge cauldrons and all this gold. And then the very final room is a room about how Celticism has been invented. And actually, there is no such thing as the Celts, you know? And I thought to myself, wow, isn't that very interesting? Here in the British Museum, I wonder why they would have set up this extraordinarily elaborate Celtic exhibit only to have the very last room as sort of pulling the rug from underneath you, almost like a cognitive dissonance, Caswell. And so you see, it's highly politicized, these things, these ideas, because of course in the UK at the time, there was the Scottish referendum for independence was occurring at that very time. And of course, there's great identity in Scotland around Celticism. There's also the Picts is a whole other history that the Celts have that we don't have. So Celticism is very unusual. And again, there's two types of things. We have history and folklore. And so what's the difference between history and folklore? And I think the difference between history and folklore is when history takes on a deeper meaning. Folklore is when history drops deeper into a deeper story. You're not just telling what happened. You're telling actually a story that has a much, much deeper meaning. And now you're into a whole different story. So that's how we approach this idea of Celtic, because Celtic has changed. What we consider to be Celt has changed over the centuries, over the decades. So what we're saying is now, what does this folklore have to say to us today? What does it mean? What do you think Celt means, you see? And one of the things I think Celt means to us is, for the Western European or the Western imagination, the Celts were a pre-Western, a pre-Roman, a pre-Latin civilization, one that was almost the antithesis to a patriarchal sort of top-down, sort of sun-worshipping kind of right on kind of colonial empire. And so the Celts lived in kind of what we imagine to be a kind of a very loose affiliation of dependencies at the time. There wasn't like one Celtic authority that ruled all the Celtic people. It was sort of a loose collection of people. They were very much into worshipping nature and the natural world, and how the natural world is changing all the time. So they were great students of change and threshold and moving on and transformation, things that can't be controlled too easily, you know. So in a way, it's the wild part of ourselves, the part of ourselves of the imagination, the part of ourselves that revels in beauty, that honors the earth as the feminine energy, the generative source. So I think that's what the Celtic bell rings to this day in our Western imagination. Yeah.
So I think I was watching a video, and it might have been you talking to your mom, Owen. And she was talking about the seasons and how the way, you know, in the original, in the native language, it sounds prettier. She likes it better than winter, spring, summer, fall. Sam Hain, right, was fall. And what is the one that's coming up that you're talking about and about to celebrate?
Yeah.
Which one is that?
Bealtaine is coming up. Bealtaine, and Baal is the Gaelic for mouth, and Tinna is a fire. Bealtaine. And of course, this is the time of year when the earth erupts in fire and in color. And so the story it has for us is what is there, what is asking to erupt and burst forth from our own mouth, from our own soil within us. So it's a great celebration of manifestation and emanation.
Nice, yeah. And we'll celebrate that over a couple of sessions with Noreen, and you'll have to come along, Caswell, and we'll be reading poetry. And Noreen has an amazing store of songs, and she's a theologian as well, much like yourself, Caswell, an interfaith reverend as well, more recently. And so yeah, between the philosophy Owen has, and I sing a few jazz songs as well, a few pop songs, and yeah, I play the bodhrán a little bit and read my own poetry and other people's poetry, and we get good old blasts, we call them, you know. We take turns and talk about different themes.
Well, what we should do right now is take a look at a video. This is, cue the producer. I wanted to show one of your performances at the place that's only a few miles down the road from where this show originates, when you were at the Kate. And so we wanted to take a peek at that video. So when did you do the recording at the Kate? How recently was that?
Old Saybrook, Connecticut. I think that was at the start of 2019.
So
Yes, because then there was the lost year of 2020, and now we're here. So
right. So this is before the lockdown. So here, yes. Let's take a look at "Take It Easy." Go for it.
Me and my brother wrote together when we were young men. This song is about self-forgiveness, and it's called "Take It Easy." Take it easy, yo. Take it easy, yo. You take it easy, whoa. You take it easy, This is the right time to think about yourself. You've been running around trying to make it for everybody else. You've got to make it happen. You know you've got it in you. And just cast your eyes on the horizon and to yourself be true. So take it easy on yourself. You take it easy on yourself. Hey, you've been running around trying to make it for everybody else.
Again, listen up, because the name is Moley. Now I'll be keeping it on the ground when the lyrics about when the lads know we getting down. I got to teach it, I don't preach it. Up on stage now, you know that I'm an Egypt. I'm not cynical, I've almost reached the pinnacle, and I'd be studying beats and I'll be getting socio-politically. You getting this? I really don't think we should betting this. My style is your rhyme like a shot, not protecting this. Now you're begging it. Won't happen to you kids, because when I be on the mic, other MCs be legging it. So listen to the words of my mouth in comparison. You don't have a part of the same, I choose my medium wisely. Singing them rhyme, expressing ideas concisely.
So take it easy on yourself. Take it easy on yourself. You've been running around trying to make it for everybody. Here we go.
it was a great gig.
Let me tell you about
that was really cool.
It was a great gig.
She comes around.
We're still
We
hearing
got
in the
a bit of
background.
Van Morrison there, though. We like to do that too sometimes, actually. We like to take some famous songs and drop in just enough, just a little taster of Van Morrison, the Belfast mystic there. And then a bit of Smooth Operator at the end. We drop in a bit of Sade as well. Don't tell anybody, but that's what we do.
Well, all right. I like it. That's really good. So speaking of music, like pop music like that, so who were your people that you listened to growing up, as far as what was on the radio?
Well, good question. It was always a great mix in our house, I mean, there were classical music, or that's one of the reasons I called my poetry book Early Music. There was always classical instrumental music going on in the background. There was a small bit of jazz, and there was some new age music at the time in the late 90s, early noughties, like Paul Winter. I don't know if you know Paul Winter, but he's a saxophonist, an amazing ensemble, the Paul Winter Consort. That's the sound of my childhood as well.
We happen to know Paul Winter because he played in our town a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's an
It's
amazing
a
man.
very small world.
Yeah,
We're big fans.
He's done the world 20 times.
Yeah.
What else do you remember on growing up listening to you? What do you these days?
So much. I mean, our parents got to perform with a lot of amazing people too when we were growing up. So we got to see a lot of cool people firsthand. Like Noreen, our mom, performed with Paul Winter for years. She would travel to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine and perform as a featured soloist in the Winter Solstice celebration that he does.
Of course.
There. And then he produced one of her albums called Celtic Soul, which is one of my favorite albums of hers. It's unbelievable. And so like we got to grow up watching and listening and seeing the rehearsals and the backstage side of things, you know, and how these musicians and performers, because we got to see dancers as well too, and speakers, you know, and we got to see how these people like lived before they walk onto the stage. And as an audience member, you can forget that these are people who have to come from somewhere and go through all the trials and tribulations that we have to go through in order to sit down and watch a show. They have to go through all the same type of stuff to actually go and perform on a show. And so I always loved watching how performers got all their stuff together so that they could actually do what they needed to do at that one time. And so that was so we like being brought up in that way. Like I can listen to anything. I can put on anything. I can watch any musician. I can watch any dancer, or you know, any performer, or even anyone who's really like anyone who's really doing their thing, and I can appreciate it for just the expression of someone really doing what they do. Like, you know, it's
and both of our parents as well are Irish traditional musicians, so we were just very lucky to meet and hang out with and see, play and rehearse a lot of the best Irish traditional musicians in the world.
And that's really interesting because, of course, Irish traditional musicians, mostly like the real traditional musicians, are not professional. They bring their music into, you know, community events, in living rooms or dance halls where the music actually is like a service, like a function, rather than a kind of an isolated performance. So we also got to see how art and music is part of everyday life, actually, how it's like a service, you know.
So now you guys performed. Now, why are you in one country and you're here in the U.S.? How did that happen? Do you guys live? Is that where you live in upstate New York? Or?
I'm in Western New York near Buffalo. I met a beautiful woman from this part of the world, and we got married and we moved up here. Me and Michal, we lived in New York City for 6 years, and then he went to Seattle and I stayed in New York City, and then we moved up here about 4 or 5 years ago, and he moved back to Ireland. So we traveled around.
A girl from New Jersey actually here who was studying here in Ireland about 5 or 6 years ago now, and we got married last December. So I married a Jersey girl, which I'm very happy about.
And so what's your plan, like, when this is over? Are you going to go back on the road? Are we going to see you in our neck of the woods? Like, how's that going to work? What plans do you have?
It's a great question. Is this going to end? Do you have the inside story, Caswell?
I really have a feeling that hopefully we'll be normal soon.
We know I could have a pint with you, Caswell, at some stage in your neck of the woods would be great. But before this was going down, we actually had the busiest 6 months, believe it or not, of our careers lined up before last March, the dismantling of the last year. So we'll be back on the road again, and we love doing weekend events. Like we do some events in Kripalu Yoga Center as well, that we have lined up, which is an amazing event space there in Massachusetts.
In the Berkshires, which we go to regularly. We've been to Boston, Boston College. Mm-hmm. We've done events there a couple of times.
Got a couple of things lined up in the South Buffalo Irish Festival over the next few years.
The South Buffalo Irish Festival is going to be huge. That's going to be, they've been waiting for us for a long time.
And you see, the great thing about us is we love to perform in churches and also in venues and theaters as well. So it's we can follow a number of invitations as well, and we love to perform at.
Is that like Michal? Is that like a subtle hint to anybody watching that might want to book you?
If anyone's got a big cathedral, we'll just turn up. You know,
you tell us. Well endowed cathedral.
Exactly. But also we do an annual gig at this amazing symposium, a theological speaking conference, really with music and art, called Gladdening Light down in Winter Park in Florida. We do that every year, and we've got a big one lined up for next year. Something very cool.
That's going to be real fun. That's just the first weekend in February. So that's like the first live event that we're kind of planning for right now, is the first weekend of February 2022. And then, of course, we've plans to bring, we love to bring groups twice a year to Ireland, groups of about 30, 35 people. And we bring them to our home, and we take over a group of cottages there in our home region and on the west coast of Ireland. And we do a little cultural sort of spiritual tour of this one location that we grew up in with our mom and with some great friends of ours. And so we're just dying to do that again.
Well, I can tell you, one of the people that would want to do that is probably my wife. She's very Irish. I mean, she's American, you know, but her family's from Boston, and you know, that she's being Irish is a huge part of her life. And of course, I'm like this English guy, you know, but she always is talking about her Irish heritage. And so she's sitting on the couch listening because she just wants to hear your accents.
Nice. Well, listen,
Mrs. Cooke, like, come on to Ireland.
She's Christine. She probably doesn't want to be Mrs. Cooke. She's not that old yet.
No. And send her over. You might even enjoy it yourself. You can sit outside.
Go feral there for a week on your own.
You can.
No, I want to go to Ireland too, man. I've never been to Ireland. I need to go there. So tell us the truth about the weather in Ireland. For all these people in America, you know, they all say it's foggy in London, it's raining in Ireland. Is that true?
See, it does rain. But you see, there is, because we're kind of out in the middle of the ocean, there is a lot of grey rain, but it doesn't set in, as they say. So every 15 to 45 minutes, there will be a shattering, dazzling sunlight coming in, blinding you. You will be sweating, and then you'll be wet, and then you'll be sweating, and then you'll be wet, because the clouds are moving so fast.
It just changes. Like it's relentless. It's just this change, and I think it really fuels. I'm a great believer in how, like, place and geography, you know, really drive so much of culture, and you have this extraordinary change and transformation and movement and wind all the time in Ireland. And I think that really infuses so much. I mean, one of the famous symbols that came out of prehistoric, way pre-Celtic Ireland, is that of the spiral. You know, you've seen a lot of Irish imagery uses the spiral, the double spiral, or sometimes the triple spiral. And that's really a great symbol for that a comfort that the Irish imagination has with change. So, and the other side of the weather is it never gets too hot and it never gets too cold.
You can't die.
It's just consistent. Yeah, you're right. No weather will kill you. You can fall asleep in the ditch at the side of the road, and you'll wake up the next morning, and you'll just rub the dew off of your face, Caswell, and off you go.
It sounds like geothermal heat. It's just kind of in that middle.
It's just there. It's just there.
Someone said it sounds like New England weather.
New England can kill you. New England weather is vicious. Yeah, New England weather is not. Do you know what it's like? It's the Pacific Northwest is very similar to Ireland.
Yeah,
like Seattle kind of thing.
They can predict the weather there though, because they can see it coming, kind of. So, but in Ireland, there's no prediction as well. So we grow up. When you grow up in Ireland, you don't know this when you're growing up in Ireland, but all the weather forecasts are always wrong. So after around 8 or 9 years or 12 or 16 years of this, you kind of don't know what's wrong, but there's something you just have this deep suspicion of anyone telling you anything.
Yeah, predicting the future. You take it sort of very like.
I don't know why you're so suspicious and bitter, but you just.
Yeah, it's definitely the weather.
Yeah.
Now, you guys had mentioned before we went on that you might be able to somehow perform here, even though you're in two separate countries.
Well, come on, we'll give you that song. Do you want to give us here, or maybe I'll play a little quick one, and then Micheál, you can do something.
I'd love to sing an old tune. Yeah.
Sure. And maybe would you give us a little bit of vocal percussion as well?
Absolutely. Well, let me sing something while you're getting ready there.
Okay.
There's a lovely song I learned recently called "The Flower of Maharali," and I'll give you a quick blast of that, and it goes. One pleasant summer's morning, when all the flowers were sprigging, and nature was adorning and the small birds sweetly singing. Oh, I met my love near Banbridge town, my bonny blue-eyed Sally. Oh, she's the queen of my heart's delight, the flower of my rally. Oh.
Well, that sounded awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And you were like, that was a nice performance. While we have another performance about to come up here. So this is great. We're going from Ireland. Now we're going to Buffalo, New York.
This is a new guitar I just got. This Loudon guitar. They're made in Northern Ireland, and I'm having a great time with it. I'm working on putting the words of a William Butler Yeats song to music at the moment. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honey bee. Live alone in the bee-loud glade, in the bee-loud glade, in the bee-loud glade. I will have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, slow like the veils in the morning, to where the cricket sings. Their midnights all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, evenings full of the linnet's wings. I hear it in the deep heart's core, in the deep world premiere, Caswell.
That's awesome. That's like, and that was the sound of 2 hands clapping.
Beautiful. No, I hadn't heard that one, Owen. Thanks a million. Well done.
Just working on that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's William Butler Yeats. He's Ireland's national poet, and he said that was his favorite poem he ever wrote.
And so you set it to music.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. So how often do you guys like write music? Are you thinking about it all the time, or does it just come in bursts? How does it work for you guys?
Well, we're putting together an album of a sacred song. We put together one album of sacred song, like a Gregorian chant in the Irish language and the English language hymns that we got from our mom. We're putting together another album of that. And we just finished an album of English language, Irish traditional songs as well that we know. So that's been great. We set that with string quartet as well from the Buffalo Philharmonic String Orchestra. So that's an exciting project that we have in the can, as they say.
Actually, the double bass player in the Kate is the principal bass player at the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. Yeah. And we were just putting together that show with him, and we were like, throw the bass in the car and come down to Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and perform for us. And so we were recording the album at that time. Geez, that was back in 2019 already. So yeah, we're working on other stuff now. Doing stuff for film as well. And Mihal just recorded a couple of beautiful early music concerts for festivals that were kind of live streamed as well over in Ireland. One with Noreen as well too. And what else is going on? Yeah, we're designing something very special for that symposium in Florida, which is top secret, Caswell.
Well, you'll have to come back and tell us. I also hear that you have a really big fan in one actor named Russell Crowe. How did that happen?
Oh, it's good. In our own backyard. There's a great. Well, I'm right beside Limerick City here on the west coast of Ireland, and there was a great man about town from Limerick, an actor that precurses one of the original Hellraisers in Hollywood, and his name was Richard Harris. A lot of your viewers would know Richard from his roles in Camelot, and he was in the first Harry Potter, and he was in Gladiator as well. And that he was a big rugby fan, and that's where himself and Russell met. And Russell and himself are famous men for raising the glass as well. So they raised a few glasses there, and Russell loves Ireland. He's got Irish lineage. So he had made a promise that he would go and visit Richard Harris there in Limerick sometime. So when Richard died, it must be, I don't know how many years ago now Richard passed away, but we never met Richard, but we were asked to be part of an ensemble of musicians to perform on the back of a truck at a tiny little seaside town on the west coast of Ireland to unveil a statue of Richard Harris in memoriam after he died. And the word was Russell Crowe was in town, and I wouldn't have recognized him now from Adam, as they say, on the street. But in walks this fella, and we had a few pints, and we made instant friends, as they say.
Well, that's awesome. That's so cool. And of course, other people know Richard Harris also from MacArthur Park.
Yes,
MacArthur Park. And there's another. Let me tell you something about MacArthur Park. That's the reason we ended up on the Kate, actually,
because of Jimmy Webb.
Yes. Yes, and Jimmy and Mihal was at a party there, or just not a party. It was at dinner at Russell.
Jimmy and his wife Laura.
Yeah. And Russell showed some videos to Jimmy, and his wife Laura was the producer of the show, and Mihal was there and sang a few songs. And Laura had an opening on her show and invited us to be on the Kate there. Yeah, so.
And I didn't drink a drop that night, Caswell. I didn't drink a drop.
That's probably why you got invited. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine. It's just so funny how small the world is, though, isn't it? Like, and how one thing can lead to another. It's just so cool.
Russell as well is a great singer and performer, and actually started out as a musician as well. So he actually has an album. Before he did any acting, he produced his own album actually. So
he's got a whole bunch of albums now. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking now, of course, in America, probably the March 17th is a pretty good gig date for you guys, right?
It's very solid. I mean,
little joke.
No, it can be, but you know, one of the things that like one of the things we love to do is to kind of reclaim a lot of things, because so much of the depth and the wisdom and the richness of what we've inherited in Ireland in a way has been lost in the US, you know, so much of it. And even in Ireland too, Caswell, you know, seriously, we're not all going around singing Gregorian chant and songs and stuff. We're rediscovering it ourselves. And that's part of, you know, Ireland's relationship with the Catholic Church and moving beyond that. We're reclaiming a lot of this, and Ireland and the US are so closely connected. You know, the histories overlap so much, and there's so much interconnection. And so I think that there's a great story here in the US, you know, where I'm living, of a new generation sort of asking again, well, what does it mean? What is Irish? What does this Irish thing mean? You asked, what is this Celtic thing? So I think we're reclaiming this kind of idea of the green beer and the shamrock, and saying, well, what does that actually mean? You know, and the wonderful thing is that we find is that there's extraordinary meaning behind it. And it's really exciting. And what's really exciting too is the inclusion that Irish and Celticism and Irishness isn't an essentialist thing at all. I mean, St. Patrick was a Welshman. He was British, and he was enslaved by Irish pirates, you know, so he was a refugee actually. and he was enslaved. And so the idea of Irish and Irishism actually has a very open and inclusive history to it, whereby you don't have to be Irish at all or Celtic at all to understand or to share in what Celtic means for each of us.
And you touched on it earlier. You touched on it earlier on that Celtic, is an umbrella term for the pre-Christian and what came before our, the Roman and Greek story, really. And like our institutions of spirituality are changing and transforming now, especially with the technologization of prayer space and the potentiality for community online. So I think there's an awareness of what may have come before this philosophical and spiritual Western world, dare we say it. And there is great history of, like, the Christian story in Ireland is a fairly recent happening, and there was a lot going on before it. And there's a great historical record of the crossover between the pre-Christian and the Christian story. So there's a tapestry there that is, mythopoetic, if you will. And it's great to look at that and, reclaim it, as Owen was saying.
Well, guys, it's Michal and Owen. It's been great to talk to you. We've already gone almost 50 minutes. We've gone 20 minutes over, but who cares online, right? We can do it.
No one cares at all. I mean, what Joe Rogan does 3 hours, isn't he? We're here. This is hour one, man. Let's
Well, but I wanted to thank you for being on the show. I think it was great talking to you, and I definitely want to talk to you guys again. And I can't wait till you come back in this area. We should definitely stay in touch. I was intrigued about a lot of the stuff you said, and there were so many things that you've talked about that I find very much in common with you, right down to Paul Winter. So
we'd love to hear your story, Caswell, sometime too. Yeah,
absolutely. So, well, thank you guys very much, and we'll talk to you next time. And thanks for being guests tonight on our show, and thanks for staying up in Ireland.
No problem. It's coming up on 2 a.m. here in Ireland, so I'm about to turn into
party. Okay. Hey, listen, thanks to everyone out there too.
Thank you guys.
Down the road, Caswell. Thanks very much.
All right. Well, hey, those guys were great to talk to, and I really appreciate them coming on the show. And also to Ellen, who suggested they come on the show and sent me all their information. And then I started looking them up online, listening to their music, listening to some of the not the lectures, but the chats they had, like with their mother, who they were talking about on Celtic spirituality and things like that. And it's just very interesting stuff, excellent stuff, and we could go on all night long with it. But we're going to end it right here for now. And I suggest you go check out their website, like them on Facebook, and follow them on YouTube so that you can really figure out what it was that was really so special that we wanted to have them on the show as well, because they're just cool guys. Thanks for watching the Caswell Cooke Show. Good night, everybody. Good night, Mom.